What's going on, fellas? Um, just have to restart the stream. Let's see. Let's throw that on. Let's just go here. Start that goal. Let's just go here. There we go. That's working. So yeah, I don't know what happened. My internet kind of just crashed out, and just in the middle of the stream, it just went out. I apologize for that, boys. But I'll wait a few seconds for more of you guys to join the stream. Yeah, so we're just going live again. We're just redoing this for anybody who's joining the stream late or was here before. I was live streaming before at 8, and midway my internet kind of just crashed out. But yeah, we're back. What's going on? What's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. Welcome. But yeah, we were reacting to a bedtime MMA video before. It's just kind of going through every weight class and talking about the most skilled fighters at every weight class. It was fun. It was pretty fun. We kind of finished it though. But yeah, let's pull up some of these things. Let's go schedule and everything. So yeah. Started coming up. What's going on, John? Yeah, I don't know what happened before my internet kind of crashed out. But yeah, I think everything should be good now. But yeah, so yeah, as I touched on a little bit before, we have Derek Lewis and Towson coming up. But let's just go back to that bedtime MMA video. Let me just pull this thing up. Let's see if we can find this. Oh, there we go. Turan says Tapori said he wants to return UFC 323 in December. Yeah, I would love to see that happen. Obviously, at that point, it's not going to be in Spain or anything like that. It'll be in Vegas, but I would still like to see that. The only issue that I see with that, though, is I don't know who's going to fight. If he fights Patty or Gaethje or Armin like immediately, and they don't have to fight somebody else, then sure, I could definitely see that happening. But if Patty's going to fight Gaethje, it's not going to happen in August. So it's probably going to have to happen a little bit later. So if it happens later than that, if it happens in September or October, I think it's going to be a little bit of too quick of a turnaround for them to once again fight for the belt in December. So that's the only thing I'll say about that. I don't know who he would fight, but if he's very adamant about fighting in December, maybe he could push the UFC's hand, and maybe they'll just give him an Armin or a Patty or a Gaethje right away. And yeah, and he could just fight. But we'll see what happens. As I said, I think the most fair thing, in my opinion, would be Gaethje versus Patty, match them up against each other, and the winner of that fight would just fight Topuria for the belt in January, February, whatever it ends up being. That's what I would like to see them do. And yeah, I know Drickus talked about that potentially happening in August on his card, but it seems like that's not real, that report. So I don't know when they would possibly fight, but yeah, we'll see. Turan said it's July now and December some months ago. That's true. But the only thing, so for Patty and Gaethje, we know they're not fighting in August. So if they're not fighting in August, it would have to be like September or October. Um, and at least for Patty, assuming Patty wins that fight, let's say they fight in October. If they fight in October, Patty usually likes to get out of weight when when he just fights or after he fights and when he gets out of camp, which he wouldn't be able to do obviously for this. Now maybe he'll make exceptions because he's fighting for the belt, but still, even without that, it's kind of a quick turnaround. Let's say if he fights in October or even September. If he fights in September, then he'll have October, November, like 2.5 months, let's say. It's still a little bit of a quick turnaround, but yes, I mean, I guess it theoretically could be done. And they are fighting for the belt. They're not just fighting, just a random fight. So maybe they'll make it work. But we will see. We'll see. I think the most ideal thing that they could have done was actually fight in August, but we saw Patty, match up against Ilya, and and he's just too fat at this point. He's not gonna have enough time to cut all that weight and train at the same time and prepare for a title fight. Obviously, would be the toughest fight of his career. Now, I will say, as I said before a little bit, if the UFC decides that they don't want to do Gaethje versus Patty, or they don't want to do a number one contender fight, and they just want to give one of those guys a title shot immediately, then yeah, obviously December would be fine. They'll definitely be able to put a fight together. Maybe they do a Gaethje versus Patty, and then they just give Armin the title shot right away. I don't think so, just because Dana has talked about, Armin has to fight at least one more time before he gets a title shot. So I don't think that would happen, but theoretically, I guess that could happen. Um, but yeah, Rick, welcome back to the stream, Rick. I don't know what happened before my internet just crashed out. Women's MMA should be brand is it's too low level, not entertaining. Yeah, I mean a lot of women's MMA fights are not the best. But there's a couple fighters that women's MMA fighters that I think are decent. But for the most part, I would agree with you. Um, no more women's fights in the UFC. Give me Cameron girls though. Very nice, very nice. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, in terms of cards, though, I mean, we do have some pretty good cards coming up. UFC 317 was pretty good. I thought it was pretty good on paper, but even afterwards, it kind of over delivered, and we have some other ones that are coming up. I think they should book Gaethje versus Topuria for UFC 223 if Paddy Pimblett and Armin as the co-main. Topuria, easy. Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, listen, I don't personally think Gaethje deserves it, but I also don't personally think anybody deserves it at this point. So, um, based on that, I mean, sure, if they do Gaethje versus Topuria, fine. They could put that fight together. I think it'll be a relatively easy fight for Topuria, but listen, Gaethje has a decent chin or well, a really good chin, but we'll see how it holds up to Topuria. But also, Gaethje is pretty powerful and dangerous on the feet, so I think it'll be a really fun fight. But yeah, I definitely would lean with Topuria in that one. And yeah, if you do Pimlet versus Armin, I'm sure both of those guys would be willing to do that, to take that fight. Um, I mean, I'm almost positive Paddy Pimblett would take a number one contenders fight at this point. I believe he's number 8 in the rankings. Let's see. Um, why does this fan thing keep coming up? All right, let's see. He's currently so yeah, Paddy's number 10 in the ranking. So I'm sure he'll be willing to do a number one contenders fight. And for Armin, he actually talked about it recently. He said that what's it called? That he got offered a couple fights after he pulled out of his title fight in January. He accepted one, declined the other. But I'm sure he'll accept the number one contenders fight versus Paddy Pimblett. So I'm sure they'll be able to put that together. Rick wants to see Ariane Lipsky in there. They can add Paddy Armin as co-main. Yeah, I mean, listen, if they do Gaethje versus Topuria as the main event of that card, I think it would be a wise decision to put Paddy and Armin on the same card. Because listen, if they're doing Gaethje versus Topuria, obviously they're going to have Paddy versus Armin. There's no other matchups for either one of those guys. But But yeah, so I think that would be a pretty good card to put together. It'd be really fun, and I kind of like what the UFC does sometimes, where they have a title fight, at a certain weight class, and their co-main event or a different fight on the main card is a number one contenders fight. So I think that'd be pretty good. I don't see Gaethje going out early like Do Bronx. He's going to put up more of a fight. Yeah, I mean it's probably true. I would probably agree. Obviously, uh, Do Bronx, Charles Oliveira pushes forward a lot more than Gaethje probably would, and he kind of runs into shots. I think we kind of saw that a little bit. Uh, in this fight against Taporia, as well as some other of his fights, he kind of just like runs into stuff at times, and I think that's kind of what happened in this fight. So yeah, so I mean, he went out relatively quickly, but for Gaethje, I think Gaethje was also going to take a lot of shots, and let's see if he could take the power of Taporia. But I wouldn't be surprised if he lasts longer than Charles did. Now, could he actually put up a fight? I mean, yeah, it's definitely possible. He's going to be bigger than Taporia. He's going to be very powerful and dangerous. I think in close, those uppercuts could be a big weapon for Gaethje. He has really good uppercuts, so we'll see how those play out. But but yeah, I think it'll be pretty good. Rick says, "Take a joke, bro." My bad. I knew it was a joke. I didn't get mad or anything. But co-main can be Josh Van versus Pantoja. Featured can be Patty and Armin. Yeah, that would be a good one. That'd be a really good card to put together. Main event: Gaethje, Ilya. Co-main: Josh Van, Pantoja. I think both of those fights are guaranteed to be very, very exciting. Essentially guaranteed to be very, very exciting. And then if you have Patty Armin on the same card, now you're talking about one of the best cards of the year, at least for top three fights. That would be really fun and really good. We'll see what the UFC decides to do, but I wouldn't mind a card being put together like that. Those are three fights that I think are really fun for one, and also they mean a lot in terms of rankings, and obviously the other ones are title fights. But yeah, Gaethje isn't a push forward type of guy. He's patient. He's certainly gotten a lot more patient throughout the years. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a lot more patient, but I think in the end, I think a big factor in that fight is going to be the jab of Taporia. Gaethje doesn't really throw too many jabs, and I think there's going to be times where Taporia utilizes footwork and gets on the inside. Now, Gaethje may actually want to fight on the inside. He's actually really good on the inside. He has great uppercuts, so I think that could be a weapon for him. But if you're getting on that inside boxing range, of course, you're always getting into the danger area versus Taporia. A power puncher, that's where like that inside boxing range is probably his best area. So there's always the danger there, but yeah, that could be interesting. The leg kicks too. Yeah, a lot of people talk about this, that leg kicks against Taporia is probably, the most effective thing you can do against him, at least on the feet, which probably I would agree, because with leg kicks, you are able to stay at range a little bit, stay away from that power. And if you're able to, kick his legs enough, maybe you can. I mean, obviously, hopefully you can hurt his legs, and then you can put together some of your own offense. But still, if you're even besides that, if you're hurting, his legs, maybe you'll zap some of the power away from his right hand or even his left hook. And as the fight does prolong, and as maybe he gets a little bit more tired, and as well as those leg kicks start to pile up, you hope that that really plays an effect and starts to pay dividends for you. So I do think the leg kicks can be somewhat of an advantage, I guess, for Justin Gaethje. But at the end of the day, at the same time, usually when we talk about strikers versus wrestlers, you want to be wary about your leg kicks, because yes, Taporia is great on the feet, and maybe he wants to keep this fight on the feet. But if Gaethje's throwing a bunch of leg kicks, especially if they're effective, I think there's going to be times where Taporia maybe looks to catch one of those leg kicks and take Gaethje down. And I've talked about this a bunch of times. I think if this fight goes to the ground, it's essentially over. Um, I just think Gaethje doesn't really know what he's doing all that much on the ground. And he's a good wrestler. He has really good takedown defense, like really good takedown defense. But once he gets on the ground, it just seems like he doesn't really know what he's doing. And he gets submitted a lot of the times when he's down there. We saw it in his previous two title shots against Charles Oliveira and against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if we saw it again here against Taporia, or maybe Taporia drops him, or maybe Taporia just, finds a takedown. And from there, I wouldn't be surprised if he found a submission. I just think there's a really big advantage on the ground for Taporia um, against Gaethje, and I feel that way for a lot of guys, honestly, against Gaethje. But yeah, I mean, that would be a really good card. That could be put together. I definitely would be in favor of it. As I said, it would probably be one of the best cards of the year for sure, at least on paper. We'll see how it pans out, um, but yeah, I mean, should be pretty good, and I wouldn't mind it. But it'll be interesting to see what the UFC actually ends up doing. If they do something similar to that, that would be fun. If they're really insistent on putting Patty versus Gaethje together, then sure. I mean, I think they're gonna have to do some convincing to get Gaethje to accept that fight. I'm sure they'll offer him a lot of money to do that. Number one contenders fight. But the only issue with putting together Patty and Gaethje is where does Armin go at then? Like, who do you match him up against? Because then it almost feels like he's going to have to fight twice before he gets a title shot. Um, if you're putting Patty and Gaethje together, and the winner of that fight gets a title shot, so it kind of just makes things um, tricky and a little bit more complicated. But it'll be interesting to see what they do. Listen. I think probably in terms of fairness, uh, probably what they should do is maybe do Ilya versus Armin, and then do Gaethje versus Patty as a number one contenders fight on the same card. But I don't think they're going to do that, and yeah, I think Gaethje's a lot more likely to get a shot than Armin at this point, at least right away. If Armin fights somebody and he wins, then maybe, but but at least at this point, yeah. But but yeah, so that should be interesting. We'll see what happens the rest of the year. We already have some cards that are planned out already, and it'll be interesting to see what other cards they put together. I'm definitely interested to see when Tom Aspinall is going to fight next. Who is he going to fight as well? I'm assuming it's going to be Cyril Gane, which is kind of just an all right fight, honestly. But finally we can get to see Tom Aspinall fight again, and I think in that fight, I think it'll be relatively fun, but at the end of the day, I think Tom is just going to take down Gon, and I think he'll eventually be able to find a submission in the end. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see when they book that fight. Other fights that I would like to see them put together is well, this is already going to happen, but I'm interested to see when it does. JDM versus Islam. It is unfortunate that we're not getting Islam versus Ilya, but still, at the end of the day, Islam versus JDM is a really good fight within itself. Islam moving up a weight class, it'll be interesting to see how he pans out at the welterweight division, how he pans out against a guy who's probably going to be bigger than him, probably going to be more powerful than him. So that definitely would be a really fun fight, and I'm interested to see how that one pans out. I heard some rumors that fight is going to be in New York in November, but I guess we'll wait to see when that officially gets announced. I also would like to see. I have a video just came out about this today, actually. But Kamaru Usman versus Bilal Muhammad. I think that's the fight to make. Usman's coming off a win against a contender in Joaquin Buckley. Bilal just lost the title. Both of these guys are former champions. I would like to see them put that fight together. And it would be a really cool story for Kamaru Usman if he is able to win that fight. Because at that point, he would probably fight for the belt next. And how crazy would that be? Usman, former champion, a pretty long reigning champion, gets head kicked, then loses the rematch against Leon. But how crazy would it be if after all of that, he's able to claw his way back, get a couple wins under his belt against Buckley and potentially against Bilal Muhammad, and get another title shot and maybe even win the belt? It'll be really interesting to see if he could pull something like that off. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. I don't think Usman's going to be a champion again, but it would be pretty cool um, to see what does end up happening there. Um, Mikey, what's going on, Mikey? Welcome to the stream. Bro, keep up. You'll soon. On YouTube, my friend. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, listen, I've definitely made a bunch of poor predictions. Some of the most recent ones have been pretty good. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's always upswing, downswing kind of thing. Sometimes you get lucky, I guess, and whatever. But yeah, lately it's been going well, but earlier on it hasn't really been that great. But yeah, but I appreciate that. I really appreciate you tuning in to the live streams, you tuning into some of the videos, and I really appreciate that. Um, and then have you thought of making longer form content like Louis Tracy or Guru? Yeah, I probably I think kind of what my longer form content at this point is kind of these live streams where my actual videos themselves are like around 8 minute videos, 8 to 10 minute videos where they're kind of just talk about a fight, give my prediction, and maybe give some background on a certain fighter that would be involved in that fight as well, and kind of just step by step giving out like why I think this guy is going to win and how and all that stuff. And those are kind of my videos. But in terms of like longer form content, maybe talking about more topics, maybe being a little bit more free roaming, I guess. I kind of use these live streams as that. And yeah, I mean, welcome to the stream. I stream every day during the week, 8 p.m. Eastern time. But yeah, I really appreciate that. It does really mean a lot. And thanks for watching the videos. Um, but yeah, if I'm a UFC matchmaker, UFC 230 main event would be Topuria Gaethje. Co-main field feature fight would be Armin Dom Reyes and Jamal Hill. I actually talked about that fight. That's funny actually. I think they should put that fight together as well. A Wellmaker and Talbot. That's yeah. I mean, if the UFC ever put a card together like this, that'd be really fun. We'll see what happens with the main event, what they decide to do with Topuria next. But yeah, I mean, Koman, Van, and Pantoja, that's essentially guaranteed. We'll see when that does end up happening. If it is December, that'd be cool. I know Van's down to fight whenever. He's very, very active. And for Pantoja, I mean, he's relatively active as well. So, and anyways, December is a pretty long ways away anyway. So I could definitely be on that card. Um, and yeah, Patty versus Armin would be a good one. It'll be really cool to see the scrambles on the ground. And honestly, I'm not super high on Patty, but I actually think either one of those guys could win that. I think Patty is very big for 155. I think on the ground he has legitimate skill. He is a very good jiu-jitsu practitioner. He has great submissions off his back and of course on top as well. And and yeah, there's just a lot to like, honestly, on the ground. On the feet, Patty's not the best, but he kind of, as his career has progressed after that Jared Gordon fight, he's kind of done a pretty good job at realizing that he's not a great boxer and kind of just staying at range, utilizing leg kicks and staying on the outside. But against a guy in Arman Sarukian, I don't think he's going to have too many problems on the feet. Arman's a better striker, I would say, than Patty for sure, but still, I don't think he'll have too many issues on the feet. But a card like that would be great. And obviously, Dominic Reyes versus Jamal Hill, I think that would be a really good one as well. Um, yeah, I actually talked about that like a couple weeks ago. I think that's the next fight that should be made. Jamal Hill's on a 3 fight skid. I believe it's 3 fights. And Dominic Reyes is on a 3 fight winning streak. So put them up against each other. Let's see, what can happen in this fight. If Dominic Reyes is able to beat Jamal, maybe at that point he would need one more fight and then he can get a title shot, which is kind of crazy. Kind of what I was talking about with Kamaru. This is a way more significant case of this, but it'd be pretty cool to see Dominic, who once contended for the belt against Sean. A lot of people thought he won, but then after that, his career kind of went downhill. So at this point, to see him on a 3 fight win streak, potentially see him up against Jamal Hill and maybe even win that fight and get close to a title shot would be pretty cool. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. And Wellmaker versus Talbot, I also really like that fight. But yeah, I mean, that would be a really, really good main card. And certainly one of the best fights of the year, or cards of the year. But we'll see what happens. I don't feel Armin Topuria would be that good of a fight as Gaethje Topuria. It's much more exciting. I agree. I would definitely agree it's more exciting. I think in terms of who has a better chance, I by far think Armin has a better chance than than Gaethje. But in terms of the fight itself, I mean, a Gaethje fight's never boring. Honestly, a Topuria fight also is never boring. So matching them up against each other is going to be fireworks. I think Topuria is going to look to strike, at least early on. Gaethje's obviously going to look to strike and throw down. So I think it's going to be really fun. In the end, I think Topuria can either take him down and submit him, or he can stay on the feet and eventually knock him out. But yeah, in terms of the fight itself, I agree. I think the Gaethje fight would be more exciting. With Armin, I'm assuming Armin is going to, I'm assuming he's going to look to wrestle a lot against against what's his face against Ilya. But at the end of the day, I think Ilya is probably too good of a wrestler to just get taken down and held down. And in the end, there's going to be some occasions where Armin's stuck on the feet versus Taporia, and Taporia just hits too hard, and Armin's chin really isn't that good either. So in the end, I think Ilya would win that fight. I think he beats both guys, but yeah, in terms of a more fun fight, I agree. It's probably Gaethje. From the kick side of things, how you doing? I'm doing pretty well. How are you? How are you? I heard Shafkat versus Bilal was going to be UFC 321 in October. Actually, I forgot about that, but I did hear that as well. That'll be interesting. That was supposed to be the title fight that was supposed to get made, and JDM was the last second replacement. So yeah, man. Listen, if they do that, fine. It kind of sucks for Shafkat a little bit because he was going to get a title shot, and he's been injured so much. It seems like in every one of his fights, he's hurt in the fight or before the fight he's hurt, or after the fight he's hurt. There's just so many injuries and so many surgeries with Shafkat, and I think that's really going to limit his prime. I think in terms of skill, he's really good, super physical on the feet. He has great kicks, pretty good wrestler, pretty good submissions. There's a lot to like about Shafkat. The problem with him is he's just always injured, and it seems like he's always getting surgery. But yeah, if he's healthy and he comes back, I would like to see him against Bilal. That'd be a good fight. I think I honestly probably favor Shafkat in that fight if he is healthy, but we will see. Mike says Rufus doesn't deserve that Ilya smoke. Rufus, you mean are you saying Rufy? I think Ilya would beat Rufy if you're talking about Rufy. But yeah, I mean, I think assuming you're talking about Rufy, I think he's kind of far away from a title shot at this point. And I talked about this a couple times, but I don't know how long Taporia is going to stay at 155 or even stay in the UFC. He kind of just strikes me as a guy that wants greatness. He wants to fight, for the belt relatively quickly. Oh, Justin is Rufus. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, for Gaethje though, I would agree with you though. I don't really think he deserves it. But as I said, I also don't think anybody else deserves it either. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, I would agree with you though, Mikey. I don't think he deserves it at this point. Armin has a chance. And a chance to blow it last minute. Yeah, he did. He did. I mean, the same thing kind of happened to Charles, where he had a title shot and he got hurt last second, but he had to fight again before he got his next title shot. He actually fought twice and he lost the second fight. Well, he fought 3 times actually. But yeah, so I'm assuming Armin's probably gonna have to fight again if he wanted to, if he wants to get another title shot. But we'll see. There's just a lot of moving parts, honestly. Armin pull out because he couldn't make it. That's what actually Dana kind of touched upon that a little bit. A lot of people were speculating that he just missed weight and he wasn't actually injured, or like he wasn't close to making weight. And he wasn't actually injured. I guess I mean I don't really know, but I wouldn't be surprised if this whole thing was just that he couldn't make weight and he said he was injured just to save face. I don't know, but there was some weird things leading up to that and even after that. So I don't really know what happened there, but yeah, I don't know. There's just like a lot of moving parts, honestly, at 155. Definitely really interested to see. In terms of the actual the Drickus thing where he said it was going to be Paddy versus Gaethje as the co-main, it's kind of weird. Like, why would he make that up? Maybe he just completely made it up and came out of nowhere. But I almost feel like there's some truth to that. Maybe it's not going to be on his card, but there's some truth to that fight actually happening. We'll see. We'll see what does end up happening. I know a lot of people talked about that fight getting put together, but we will see what ends up happening. And of course, Topuria, as you touched on before, he said he wants to fight in December. I definitely would like to see Topuria fight again. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, other fights that I think will be fun and that I think will get made. Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. I think that's going to happen later on this year. I actually think Uncle Ive talked about it. I believe he said they were fighting in December. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that was the fight that was rumored to be made in December. But Magomed talked about it a bunch of times that he was going to fight Pereira, and it didn't happen yet. So we'll see when they actually do fight. But I'm assuming Magomed's next fight is going to be Alex. I think at this point, I mean, he's talked about it a couple times. He just, Alex talking about, he just kind of felt that he was fighting way too much, and he felt that his body was getting a little bit tired, and I kind of expected it after his last fight, kind of a lackluster performance and his first loss in a little bit of time. I kind of expected him to take some time off, and I think we're really seeing that now. And yeah, but yeah, so I would like to see that fight get put together. Another fight I would like to see Yuri versus Khalil Roundtree. That's another fight that I think would be fun. Yuri's obviously extremely crazy on the feet, very fun style, very powerful. Haven't seen him in a while either. Um, but uh, but yeah, so it'd be nice to see him matched up against a guy in Khalil Roundtree. Roundtree has been, kind of on a tear. I know he did lose to Alex Pereira, but but outside of that, he was able to put some wins together. He was able to put a pretty impressive performance against Jamal Hill together, and he's moving up the rankings. He is also the number 4 ranked guy. So I would like to see a fight between Roundtree and Yuri. I think that would be fun. I don't know if these guys have fights booked yet. I don't think so, but assuming they don't, I would like to see that fight get put together. Then maybe you could put together a fight between Rakic and Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg is kind of a weird one because I thought he lost the fight against Jan Blachowicz, but on the scorecards, technically he won. I thought it was a bad judged fight. But regardless, whether he won or whether he lost, it was a very close fight. He's currently the number 3 ranked guy, but I just think a lot of guys around him would have better fights, more exciting fights, against some other guys. And I kind of just feel like he's going to be left out because for Pereira, he's going to fight Magomed next, most likely. For Yuri, I guess he could theoretically fight Ulberg, but I think a more fun fight would be Yuri versus Khalil Roundtree. Roundtree is also on the up and up. Not saying Ulberg isn't, but Roundtree's kind of putting on better performances, I would say. Um, so I would personally like to see Yuri versus Roundtree. And if they do Yuri versus Roundtree, then Carlos Ulberg doesn't really have many guys outside of that. It's kind of just Jan, who he just fought last and he beat him. Obviously, they can't make that fight. They can do him versus Jamal Hill, I guess, possibly. But I think other guys like Dominic Reyes versus Jamal is a better fight. You can do him versus Rakic, which I guess that one is interesting, or against some other guys. But all these guys are significantly lower in the rankings than he is. Like he says, best unranked prospect in your opinion. There's a lot of really good guys. Honestly, I would like to see like a list of unranked fighters. There's so many like really good unranked fighters. Um, let's see. Um, let's see. Yeah, this is definitely not unranked fights. Sorry, I'm just trying to find a list of. Let's see if I can find this. I don't know. I can't find a list, but just guys coming off the top of my head. I think Loner Kavanaugh is really good. Is he the best? I don't know. Probably not. There's probably better guys, but he's good. I also really like. Yeah, I really got to see a list here. But the guy at 125, the Brazilian guy, what's his name? Bruno Silva or something Silva. Oh man, I'm blanking out here. I really got to see a list. Let's see. I mean, I believe Peyton Talbot's unranked. I think he's pretty good. He definitely took a step back after his loss against Barcelos, but I thought in his next fight, his last fight, he kind of proved a lot of the doubters wrong about his wrestling is pretty remarkable in that short period of time. He was able to, he was able to not only stop takedowns but also reverse takedowns, get on top, looking pretty good on the ground, really good scrambles, really impressive scrambles. So yeah, wrestling is pretty solid. Yeah, he's pretty solid as well. Yeah, that's a good point. Vinicius Oliveira, I think, is pretty good. Um, man, yeah, I just can't find an updated list here. Felipe Lima is solid, I guess I would say. Um, there's definitely a couple of guys that are like on the tip of my tongue. I just can't. I'm kind of blanking on here. I'm just trying to see if I could find any of these guys on the list. But there's a lot of really good unranked guys in the UFC. I don't see a lot of 125ers that are really good, even unranked. Um, and then 155 as well. There's a lot of guys. Um, yeah, I just can't find a list. But yeah, no, there's a lot of really good fighters. Let's see. Oh man, it's so silly. When I look up unranked prospects UFC, the first one that comes up is Magomed Ankalaev. I don't think he's unranked. um, is Rahul Rosas ranked? I don't know if he is. I don't think so. Actually, I'm almost positive he's not. He's a solid prospect. His striking is not amazing, but it's getting better, and his wrestling's pretty good. Um, yeah, as I said, Loner Kavanaugh is pretty good. Um, Ludovic Klein, I think, is pretty good, although he has gassed out before. Oh, this is a good one. Esteban Ribovic. I'm very high on him. He's super, super durable, like ridiculously durable. Hits really hard, has pretty good boxing. He's able to get on the inside and have success. In his last fight, he didn't come out on top. But overall, I think Ribovic is a pretty good fighter, and I'm pretty high on him. As I said, Vinicius Oliveira is another guy that I'm personally pretty high on. Um, for Vinicius, he's obviously like relatively talented. He has decent wrestling and jiu-jitsu, and he has decent striking as well. Striking being the best aspect of his game. But the thing about Vinicius is he can take a shot really well. He hits really hard, and he pushes through things very well. I mean, there has been times out there where Vinicius just looked pretty tired out there, but he kind of just pushes through it. Obviously, not comparing him to Dricus, but we see a similar thing in Dricus, where a lot of times in Dricus's fights, he just seems like very tired out there, but he's just able to push through things. And I think we kind of see somewhat of a similar thing with Vinicius. Obviously, Vinicius is nowhere near the level of Dricus, but I just think that one aspect is kind of similar between both of these guys. And Vinicius does push a pretty high pace, which is something that I also like to see a lot. So yeah, there's a lot of really good ones. I mean, Faraz Ziam also has impressed me a lot. He's definitely been pretty good. Kevin Vallejo, the guy who lost to Gene Silva. I think he's also a really, really good one. A lot of power in that right hand. Pretty good boxing. Does a nice job of getting on the inside. Honestly, kind of a similar stand-up style to Taporia. So I think he's really good. What else? What else? As I said, Ludovic Klein, I think, is pretty good. I think Joel Alvarez is also pretty good. I heard he's moving up to 170. So maybe that size that he had at 155, he's not going to be the same at 170. But in terms of a prospect, I think he's pretty good. Decent stand up on the ground is also pretty good. I think Matus Rebecki is decent. As we talked about, Bahamundes, I think, is pretty decent as well. I think he's ranked though at this point, or maybe he's not. But I think Bahamundes is pretty good. Um, yeah, as he says, Squinlin is pretty good. I actually thought his last performance was pretty good, because he was kind of more so seen as a striker. But in that fight, he decided to wrestle quite a bit and had a lot of success. So I think I agree with you though, Mikey. I think he has a pretty high ceiling as well. Um, John says Orbai too. Orbai is coming off a ridiculous. Well, actually, his last fight he won, but before that, he was coming off ridiculous damage. But he's a pretty good fighter as well. I think on the feet he has like relatively heavy hands. So I wouldn't say great, but I'd say solid striking. And on the ground, he has pretty good wrestling as well. IDK, if you mentioned him yet, no, yeah, I did it before that, but that's a good mention as well. Or by definitely is a pretty good mention. I would like to see if he's able to round out his game a little bit more, maybe just tighten things up a little bit on the feet. He does get hit more than you would like. But in terms of like, the physical skills itself, he hits pretty hard. He can definitely take a shot, and his wrestling's pretty good. And his striking's solid. So I definitely think there's a lot of things to like about his game. So I would agree with that. Um, some other guys. I mean, Brian Battle's decent. I don't know if he's ranked, but he's decent. Um, who else? Jacob Smith, who just fought this previous weekend. I think he's good. I think his performance is great. Just because he kind of just gassed out right away. He thought he would just be able to run through his opponent, which he wasn't able to, and he gassed himself out. Definitely wasn't an amazing look for him, but still, I think the physical tools are there. He's really, really fast. His wrestling is really good. He certainly has power, and I think he'll be fine. So I definitely am high on him as well. Jacob Smith talking about. Um, even I mean, obviously he's not a prospect at this point, but even a Kevin Holland, I think he's taking his career a little bit more seriously at this point. I think at 170 he's a much better fighter, significantly better fighter than he was at 185. And I believe he has a fight coming up pretty soon. But yeah, he's taking his career just a lot more seriously, and I think he could actually be a pretty good fighter. So we'll see what he does. But yeah, we also have G-Rod, Gregory Rodriguez. He has a lot of power, and his striking is getting better every time we see him. Yeah, I mean, even Ikram Aliskerov is pretty good. Bruno Ferreira is pretty good. Who else? Who else? I think he's ranked at this point, but Mingyang Zhang, he's pretty good. Has a lot of power in his hands and certainly could take a shot pretty well. Yeah, I mean, who else? Taliesin Teixeira, we talked a little bit about that before, but at this point he is ranked. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of really good prospects for sure. There's a lot of guys to keep your eye on. And I think the UFC is kind of in a decent spot at this point in terms of their prospects. I think there's a lot of guys that are unranked currently or ranked relatively low in the rankings that I think are actually like really good. And I think, we're going to see a lot of guys coming up that will turn out to be championship contenders and fight for the belt. And we're going to see a lot of new names in there. I know at 155 we kind of had an issue where it was kind of the same recycled guys. It was either Chandler, Poirier, or Gaethje. But at this point, I think we're going to see some new guys. Obviously, we have a new champion at 155 in Taporia. And I think Armin's going to get a title shot relatively soon. I think Patty may get a title shot as well. So those are some new names and some new faces to get in there for sure. And even some other guys in that division. Dan Hooker is kind of making a resurgence. We'll see how his career goes. We also have Beneil Dariush. I don't think Beneil Dariush is ever going to fight for a belt at this point. I talked about Dariush a little bit before his fight against Moicano and even after the fight. I think skill for skill, Dariush is honestly one of the better fighters in the UFC. His wrestling is honestly elite. His ability to stop takedowns, his ability to get back up once he's on the ground is very elite. His jiu-jitsu is really good. There's a lot of really good things about Beneil Dariush. The problem with him is his chin's just not there. He never had a great chin, but especially at this point, his chin is really not there. And And I think that's gonna be a real issue for him. When you talk about guys that are athletic and hit pretty hard, that's usually the guys that he has problems with. When you talk about his fight against Armin, or even when you talk about his fight against Charles, I think the reason for why those guys were able to win so easily was because they hit really hard and because they were athletic. And really the first shot that either one of those guys were able to land hurt Armin, or hurt Benil, I should say, and they were able to finish him not too long after that. So um, are there guys ahead of Dariush that I think he could beat? Probably. But when you talk about guys that hit really hard and are athletic, I think those are really the guys that Benil is gonna struggle with a lot. Um, so yeah. I mean, he even got dropped by Moicano, who really doesn't hit all that hard. So I don't think that was a great look for his chin. Um, but yeah, I mean, even I know a lot of people gave up on this guy, but Benoit Saint Denis, I still think there's a chance that he could be decent. I was actually really high on him initially. Then he got knocked out by Poirier, but I still thought he did a lot of good things in that fight, and I was still high on him after that fight. Then he took a beating and lost to Moicano, and a lot of people jumped off the bandwagon at that point. It wasn't a great look for sure, but I still kind of thought maybe Benoit could still be pretty good. But in his last fight, he kind of went up against nobody. And yes, he did dominate. Yes, he did find a finish, but I didn't think he looked great. His head movement looked like worse than it did prior, and he was looking a little bit more stiff on the feet than he did prior. Um, so I don't know. I don't know how good Benoit is going to be at this point. I was pretty high on him in the past, even after the Moicano fight. I thought, this guy could be good, but we'll see. I mean, it's possible that he will be good, but um, it'll be interesting to see where his career goes. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys. Even at welterweight, you have Carlos Prates. Yes, he did lose to Ian Gary, but I still think his career is gonna be on the up and up. I think his striking is pretty good. Good kicks, certainly extremely powerful. And he kind of just has like that inevitable style. In the end, it wasn't able to work against Ian Gary, although he got very close. But what I mean by inevitable style is um, maybe early on he's not going to be super super aggressive, but in the end he's eventually going to be able to land a big left hand or just a big shot of some sort and knock his opponents out. He has a ridiculous amount of power. I think we see that in most of his fights, even against Ian Gary, where Gary was able to survive in the end and find the win. But in that fifth round, he had Ian Gary in trouble, and I think if Prates pushed a little bit harder, he probably could have found the finish, honestly. Um, but but yeah, I don't know. So we'll see what happens with Prates. I know he does have a fight scheduled and booked, or about to be booked, against Geoff Neal. So that's going to be a really fun one. I think that's going to be an absolute banger. The thing with Geoff Neal though is he's very hit or miss. He either puts on like a really good performance and beats some guys that are ahead of him in the rankings, and some guys that you probably think he would lose to, and then he goes up against some other guys that you think he should beat and he loses to them, or he's in a closer fight than he should be against them. So Geoff Neal is definitely an interesting one. Um, but I think we're going to see a pretty good Geoff Neal versus Carlos Prates. But in the end, I think Prates is going to win that fight. I just think that the length and power of Prates is just going to be a little bit too much. But Geoff Neal does have great boxing if he's able to get on that inside and put together some combos. Who knows what can happen? But as I said, I do lean with Carlos Prates in that fight. Um, but yeah, as we talked about, Kamar Usman potentially fighting Bilal, but yeah, there also was some rumors that Bilal is going to fight Shavkat next, so that'll be interesting to see. Um, John with the signature emoji. Um, yeah. Um, but yeah, and also another prospect to look out for. I mean, he's a number seventh ranked guy at this point. I don't know if he's really a prospect, but it's Michael Morales. I think he's going to be really good. Actually, the reason being is not because I think he's super technical or anything on the feet. The thing about Michael Morales is he's technical enough on the feet. He has a good jab and is a good left straight. But the thing about him is he just has a ridiculous amount of power. He's way bigger than anybody else at welterweight. He hits really hard. And I think in the end, that's going to be enough to move up the rankings, beat a lot of guys, and potentially even become champion. I honestly, I would be surprised if before it's all said and done, if Michael Morales doesn't become a champion. I think eventually he will. Um, because on the feet, he's just super dangerous. He can take shots really well. He hits really hard, and even on the ground, I mean, guys are, I'm sure, going to look to take him down, and maybe got some guys will have some level of success. But the thing about Prates is, even when he does get taken down, he's just so much bigger than his opponents and so much more physical than his opponents that he's kind of just able to stand right up, even if his opponent has better technical grappling or better technical wrestling than he does. So I think the overall physicality level for Morales and the physicality advantage that he has against really anybody. I don't see anybody that would have a physicality advantage against him at his weight class. So I think Michael Morales, before it's all said and done, will become a UFC champion. So that'll be interesting to see. And then moving on to middleweight, of course, we have Dricus versus Hamzat. That's probably the best fight the UFC can put together at this point. Really, really fun fight. Certainly, um, certainly the first round is probably going to determine that fight. If Hamzat's able to find a takedown early, which I believe he will be able to, maybe puts himself in a position to land a bunch of ground and pound shots, maybe puts himself in a position to potentially find a finish. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the first round. But in my opinion, as I mentioned a couple of times, I kind of lean with Dricus. I think in the first round, he will lose that first round. I think he will get probably dominated to an extent. I think Hamzat will take him down. I think he'll put Dricus in some tough positions. But in the end, I think Dricus will be able to survive round one. And if he is able to do so, I'll feel very confident in his ability to build and win and potentially even find a finish as the fight goes on. The thing about Hamzat is he's great in that first round. But if you're able to make it out of that first round, which most guys have not been able to, but if you are able to make it out of that first round, you could certainly beat this guy. I mean, listen, nobody's been able to do it thus far, but I think Dricus could potentially be that guy that makes it out of the first round, builds. Dricus also has really good cardio, and this is going to be Hamzat's first 5-round fight. And if Dricus can take this fight into deep waters, into round 3, 4, or potentially even round 5, I think that's really where we're going to see Dricus put a pace on Hamzat, maybe look for his own takedowns, maybe look for his own, power shots on the feet. A lot of body shots, I believe, he'll look for in this fight, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Dricus is able to find a victory in that matchup. So that'll be really interesting to see. But other potential matchmaking at the middleweight division, I've been hearing some rumors about Sean Strickland versus Izzy. So that'll be interesting to see if they put that fight back together. Is it going to be the most fun or exciting fight in the world? Probably not, honestly. But the thing about Izzy is, I know a lot of people think this guy may be washed, but I personally don't think so. I think the actual skill level of Izzy is still there. I think the big difference with Izzy, though, at this point is his reactions. His reactions are not nearly as good as they were in the past. He's not able to avoid shots nearly as well as he was in the past. And also the other thing about Izzy is his chin's not nearly the same. Izzy at a point was able to take shots, left hooks from Alex Pereira and take big shots from Alex Pereira. But at this point, it just seems like he's not able to take those same shots like he was in the past. So I think those are the two reasons why we're seeing Izzy get finished. But in terms of his actual skill, I think he's still there. I think his leg kicks are good. I think his jabs are still good. His stance switches are good. Right or left straights are good. His hooks are good. I think there's a lot of good things about Izzy, and I think we even saw that in his last fight versus Imavov. The first round, Izzy was looking pretty good, and I don't think he's washed. And honestly, I think he will beat Sean Strickland if they put that fight together. My issue with DDP is that he got taken down by Robert Whitaker and Brunson. How good is DDP's submissions defense? I don't think we really saw it, so I guess we don't know. He does have good jiu-jitsu, though. I have seen him in a couple of tournaments, in jiu-jitsu tournaments, against some pretty good black belts, and he was able to, obviously not get submitted and even submit a lot of his opponents. And so, yeah, I know he does have good jiu-jitsu. In terms of his submission defense, I guess we don't know, but I'm assuming it's pretty good. And yes, he did get taken down by Whitaker and Brunson, and Dricus kind of does weird stuff out there. And as I said, I'm sure he will get taken down in the first round by Hamzat. But the thing is, I think there's a chance that he could just stay safe enough to survive. He's not going to win the first round. I don't think anybody's going to beat Hamzat in round one, but But the question is, can he survive the first round? I think if he could, I think he'll win the fight. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, in the UFC specifically, I don't think we saw it tested all that much, unless I'm forgetting about something or a certain fight. But I guess we'll see. But it should be a really fun fight for sure. Let's see what else we got here. So Magomed versus Alex, we already talked about before. For Tom Aspinall, I think his next fight is going to be against Cyril Gahn. The issue with Tom is I think there's a possibility that Tom can go down a similar path to a Pantoja or Mighty Mouse. Not saying that he's going to be as great as those guys. Maybe he will, but what I mean by that is, or specifically for Mighty Mouse, is I think, Tom's division's not that good. There's not too many guys that I think that could legitimately beat Tom Aspinall. As I touched upon a couple times, I think there's a couple of good guys at heavyweight, but none of them are on the level of Tom. Like, I think Cyril Gahn, Alexander Volkov, Curtis Blades, Jailton Almeida, and potentially Taliesin Teixeira. Like, those are the only guys at heavyweight that I think are decent yeah, like decent, honestly. Just 5 guys out of all of the rankings. And out of all of those guys that I just mentioned, I would favor Tom Aspinall against all of them. So I think there's a real possibility that Tom Aspinall can really start to stack title defenses. And it is heavyweight. It is a lot more dangerous than other weight classes, and it is a lot more difficult to get a bunch of title defenses at heavyweight for sure, as opposed to other weight classes. But I kind of just think that Tom Aspinall is just so much better than everybody else. He's kind of head and shoulders above everyone else, that I wouldn't be surprised if in a year from now, 2, 3 years from now, whatever it ends up being, we see Tom Aspinall have like 4 or 5 title defenses. And he's still at the top of his game, and we don't really see anybody that could legitimately contend against him. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with Tom. It's just the problem with Tom. It's, he's at heavyweight. It's not like he could beat a bunch of these guys and then move up to fight, at a different weight class that may have better talent. Obviously there's nothing like that. And of course Tom cannot move down a weight class. So I kind of feel like he's going to be in that situation where he's just super dominant. He's just beating everybody, and he has a bunch of title defenses, and there's not going to be a real contender that can legitimately challenge him. Unless the UFC decides to bring in some guys from other organizations, like a Francis Ngannou. I did make a video talking about that I thought the UFC should sign Francis, should bring him to the UFC, and do Francis versus Tom. I think in terms of pay-per-view buys, that would do really well. I think in terms of the fight itself, that's a really fun fight, and it'll, who knows? I think that's honestly like a 50-50 fight. So I think from that perspective, it would be really fun as well. And also, it's champion versus champion. It's very easy to promote. And also, obviously, Francis's first fight back with the company. And I know some people were saying, yeah, but Francis is signed with the PFL. Yes, it is true, but if you look at, Francis, he's been signed to the PFL for what, 2 years at this point, and he's only fought once. And the one time that he did fight, the PFL, it seemed like they almost went out of business, just because they're paying him so much. They're not really making any money on their events at this point. And yes, it's good for the PFL and maybe other organizations outside of the UFC to get these bigger names. But if you have one guy that's a huge name, which the PFL only has one guy, only Francis, and he's not even a huge name, but he's a big name, I would say. And you're paying that guy so much money, it doesn't pay, honestly, because they're just paying him way too much and they're not making any money. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is I think the PFL would potentially be open to allowing Francis to go to get out of his contract and potentially go to the UFC. I know it might sound like counterintuitive for the PFL to allow that, but as I said, I just don't think they'll be able to put together another Francis Ngannou card. They just have to pay him way too much, and I believe he also has a clause in his contract that his opponent needs to get paid a certain amount. So you're talking about that main event. You're paying so much money just for that main event, and they're not really making up money at all. And also, besides Ferreira, and that fight wasn't even close. Besides him, who else could they possibly match up Francis against? So I don't know. I just think there's nothing for him to do at the PFL. But yeah. John said the PFL effed up with Francis. I agree. They just paid him like way too much money. And I think they they thought he was a bigger star than he was. Listen, Francis in the UFC was a relatively big star, but he's a relatively big star because he's the heavyweight champion and he puts on exciting fights. But in terms of his personality, like, it's not really anything super exciting. He's not going to be like a huge superstar or anything like that. He's just, he was in the UFC, the biggest MMA organization. The UFC was, pushing him a little bit. Obviously, his performances spoke for themselves, and he was growing his star power, I guess. But at the end of the day, I think Francis's name was a name because he was in the UFC. If he was in the PFL from the beginning, I don't think he would be a huge star, regardless of his fighting style. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I agree with you though. I think the PFL kind of messed up. I think what they should do. Listen, I don't think anybody's really going to contend with the UFC at least for a long time. But if I'm the PFL and I'm really serious about putting together a company that could legitimately challenge UFC in the next 10, 20, 30 years, what I'm personally doing is I'm not looking for these Francis Ngannou type guys. What I'm looking for is prospects. I'll be looking to offer these prospects a little bit more money than the UFC does, just to potentially be able to take away some prospects from the UFC and build your product that way. You know, it kind of goes this way for everything. When you talk about like sports organizations, a basketball team, a football team, when you're rebuilding, what do? You look for younger players to add to your roster, and then eventually in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, then you can become a better team and compete with some of these better teams. If you're a terrible team, you don't rebuild by signing legendary guys that other teams don't want. You got to get young guys, and I think a very similar model would be in place for the PFL. Sign younger guys, sign prospects, try to build your organization from the bottom up. Now, do I think it'll work in the end? Probably not. I think the UFC is just too big of a monopoly on MMA. They just have too many guys. Their product is just too popular, and I think it's going to be tough to do it. But if the PFL really wants to try to contend and try to make it work, I think that's what they probably should do. But but yeah, and also I think with the PFL, they're not really run that well. I think some of their models of what they're trying to do is also kind of silly with their regular season thing, their tournaments. I think that's so silly. We don't want to see tournaments getting put together and random fights. At least for me, I prefer just I want to see this guy versus this guy, put that fight together and put it in the octagon. That's what we want to see. We don't want to see tournaments where there's two guys that fans really want to see get matched up against each other. But if one guy loses or if something goes a different way, then all of a sudden you don't see that fight that the fans really wanted to see from the beginning. So I don't know. I think the PFL is making some silly decisions, but I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, they are finally starting to put on events again, so we'll see what they end up doing. But as I said, I don't think they're really going to compete with the UFC. Probably ever, but certainly they're not going to compete anytime soon. Um, but yeah, just looking at some other divisions for flyweight. Obviously, we have Pantoja versus Joshua Van. That's going to be a good one, really good one for sure. I touched upon this a little bit before. I'm definitely going to be making a YouTube video breaking this down a little bit more, but I actually think Joshua Van is the toughest fight for Pantoja in a while. I think it's going to be the biggest test of his career for Pantoja, which may sound crazy, but or at least of his title reign. I think it'll be the biggest test for him. I don't know. I just think Joshua Van kind of just has it. His boxing is really good. It's on the level of honestly like a Peter Yan or someone like that. And Van is also evolving. He's super young. He hasn't been training all that long, and he's making improvements in a pretty short amount of time. On the feet, I think we're seeing somewhat of a change in Van's style. Initially, he was doing a good job at pressuring his opponents, putting combos together, and landing shots. But at this point, I think we're seeing a little bit of a difference from Van. He's a little bit more on the back foot. He's a little bit more counter heavy at this point, and he's putting a lot more sting on his shots, which I think overall is a better strategy for him going forward. And I think he'll be able to counter Pantoja very effectively in this fight. The only thing is he going to hit hard enough to actually hurt Pantoja? Pantoja's never been finished in the UFC. He's only been dropped once, or maybe it was twice, but it was just in the same fight against Figueiredo. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think that's going to be, in terms of the entertainment value, I think it's going to be a banger. And in terms of like how close the fight is, I think it'll also be really close. I think I lean Pantoja via decision, probably. But I think Van is probably the toughest test of his career, his championship career, I guess, thus far. One other thing that'll be interesting to see though at flyweight is where does Brandon Moreno go from here? I mean, he did just beat Steve Urseg. I'm assuming he's going to have to fight at least one more time before he gets a title shot again, but it might even be more than that because Van's going to get the next title shot. If Van wins that fight, Pantoja is obviously going to get an immediate rematch. And if that does happen, then Moreno's going to have to fight again. But even if Pantoja beats Van, I think there's a chance that that Cop gets the next title shot. He's going to have to fight one more time, but if he fights somebody else and he wins, I think he can get the next title shot. Maybe you do Cop versus Brandon Moreno next as the number one contenders fight. I think that's fair. And just the thing about Moreno is, he lost 3 separate times to Pantoja. So even if he beats Cop, can you give him a title shot after losing 3 times to the champion? I don't know. But at the same time, all 3 of those fights were like very close and really fun fights. When Pantoja beat Moreno, it was a split decision. It was like a ridiculously close fight. But yeah, Pantoja was able to win in the end. But we'll see. Definitely, as I said, I think there's actually like a lot of talent at flyweight. The champion is one of the all-time greats. Joshua Van is really good. Moreno's really good. Royval is really good. Manel Kopp is really good. I personally think Steve Urseg is pretty good as well. I know he had a couple losses in a row, but I kind of just feel like for Steve, he's kind of just went up against, the best at 125. He went up against Pantoja and he lost in a really, really close fight that I thought he could have won, and maybe he did win. So against him, and he also lost against Brandon Moreno in his last fight. But Moreno, similar to Pantoja, is like an all-time great 125 pounder. I still think there's promise for Steve, but we'll see what happens. He does have a fight coming up next. I think he will win his next fight. Mikey says, sorry, brother, my phone died. I'm back. Welcome back, bro. Welcome back. Don't worry about it. But yeah, I mean, I really think there's a lot of talent at 125 for sure. At bantamweight, there's some good guys. Merab's a great champion. You have Sean O'Malley, which I don't think Sean is going to fight for the belt again because I'm assuming Rob's going to be a champ for a little while. And also, the thing about Sean is, I mean, he's good, obviously. He has really good striking, pretty good countering, good jab, good red straight, can switch stances at will, good kicks as well. The thing about Sean, though, is I just don't know if he's good enough to beat some of these guys at the top of the weight class. I mean, he is, but, it's interesting because when he fought Peter Yan, a lot of people thought Yan won. I also did think that as well, but it was a really close fight. But for whatever reason, I feel like if they ever put that fight back together, I think Yan would win in a little bit more dominant fashion this time around. But, we'll see. I think the career of Sean O'Malley is a little bit interesting. He got 2 title shots already. He did technically, yeah. Where he got a title shot and beat Aljo. Then he lost the belt, got another title shot against Merab. So I'm assuming Sean's going to have to fight a couple more times. The UFC and Dana kind of sees him as a superstar, which I don't personally see. But maybe if Sean fought, a Peter Yan or an Umar, they might give him another title shot. I would hope not, but I wouldn't be shocked. Sean, at the end of the day, Sean got a title shot coming off a loss, which is kind of crazy. But we'll see what happens in his career. Oh, man. I'm just seeing my eyes in the live stream. It looks terrible. I'm a little bit sick at this point. Last few days, I've been a little bit sick. But, yeah. Don't mind me. Kind of looks like I have the suds. But anyways, I'm feeling a little bit better now. But yeah, at bantamweight, you have Sean O'Malley, as I touched upon. You have Umar. You have Peter Yan. Corey Sandhagen is going to be fighting for the belt next. Song Yadong, I think, is pretty good. Good physicality. Solid striker, and even decent wrestler. Figueiredo just tore his ACL, I believe it was. but he's certainly going to be a player. He has pretty good power even for bantamweight. His jiu-jitsu is really good. His wrestling's pretty good, and I do think there's a lot to like with Figueiredo. Even at bantamweight, I know he did tear his ACL, and we'll see how he comes back from that. But I still think there's a lot of guys that he can beat. He's currently the number 6 ranked guy. Maybe you do a Figueiredo versus Song Yadong in the future, or a Figueiredo versus Umar. Probably not, but potentially. Um, but yeah, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of matchups you can do there, and a lot of good talent there. Some guys at the bottom of the rankings, Vinicius Oliveira. I'm a fan of him. I talked about him before. Um, Ayman Sahabi, I'm not really very high on him, but yeah, I mean he did beat Jose Aldo. Marcus McGee, I'm also not too high on him. He hits pretty hard. He has solid skills, but he's fighting Peter Yan for whatever reason. It's kind of a weird fight to be made, but I don't think he's as much of a chance against Peter Yan. Montel Jackson, I think, is actually pretty good. Pretty well-rounded fighter, pretty physical as well. Hits really hard. So I think Montel Jackson could be a guy to look out for. But yeah, we'll see. He just doesn't fight too much. That's a problem with Montel. At featherweight, good talent as well. Volkanovski, great champion. Then you have Mosar. I think early on, there's a lot of rumors that Yair was going to fight Volk next, but there's been some other rumors coming out recently. So I think Mosar versus Pico is actually the number 1 contender fight. Now, I think Mosar probably should have got a title shot without even fighting Pico, but if this is indeed a number 1 contenders fight, and whoever wins that fight between Pico and Mosar gets a title shot, um, you know, I would definitely like to see that, and I think they would be doing well on Mosar finally. I mean, as I said, I think he probably deserves it already at this point without even fighting, and uh, and he probably even deserves it prior. But at least at this point, it seems like they're not going to give it to Yair Rodriguez a title shot right away, which I thought was kind of ridiculous. Mikey says, "Brother, do you train in martial arts?" I don't currently, but I definitely have had a lot of friends push me to try to do something. I would like to. I would like to train for sure. Not really for competition, really, but just to. I mean, sparring would be fun, I guess. But I would like to train. What about you, Mikey? Do you train anything? Wrestling, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, boxing, possibly. Yeah, I have a couple friends that or I have a friend that boxes, and it would be pretty cool to get a little bit of training in. It's a great workout, obviously, and also just be pretty cool to learn how to fight a little bit. So I would like to. Maybe down the road I will train, but at this point I don't, and I don't have any plans to, at least at this point. No, but I'm gonna do shoot in October with a baddie of mine. That's pretty cool. With a baddie of mine or a buddy of mine. Um, but yeah, it's pretty cool though. That's fun. Yeah. Baddie. um, that's nice. It's fire actually. Good luck. Good luck. Um, but yeah. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the stream, brother. Welcome, welcome. Islam versus Ilya. Who do you have? I always thought Ilya had a chance. I know a lot of people didn't think so. But I always thought he had a chance just because of his power. But at that point, we didn't really see him at 155. So there was questions. How would his power look at 155? I think after his fight against Charles, though, I honestly lean Ilya. On the feet, I definitely think it would be a decently big advantage for Ilya. Islam does have good striking. It definitely is underrated, but I think Ilya is a significantly better striker. With that being said, so on the feet, I think eventually he would catch Islam, and I don't think Islam would be able to take the shots of Topuria. We already saw Islam get knocked out cold before in his career, and And I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, listen, if the fight was at 155, I would say Ilya, and I would be honestly like relatively confident in that pick. If it's at 170, I think I would probably lean with Islam just because I think he'll be maybe too big for Ilya at 170. Um, but yeah, that's what I would say. 155, I lean Ilya. 170, I lean Islam. But listen, you can never count Islam out even at 155, and you can never count Ilya out even at 170 if he potentially decides to move up to that weight class. Um, Obviously, there's still a lot of moving parts. Ilya did talk about moving up to 170, but he's going to need. He already won the belt, so that thing's checked off. That part's checked off. But he's probably going to need to get at least one title defense against Gaethje, Paddy, or Armin. It's probably going to be one of the three of those guys. Um, so we'll see if he's able to do that, and if he is able to do that, maybe the UFC would want him to fight one more time, get maybe one more title defense at 155 before they allow him to move up. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. And also, I think Islam um, has to beat JDM for this fight to even have a chance of happening. I think if Islam loses to JDM, I think there's a real chance he retires. But we'll see. Cuck versus the Buck at welterweight. Yeah, honestly, I'm not too high on the Buck, to be honest. Um, I don't know. I honestly I was never high on him, and then he went up against Usman, and he really didn't look good, and I was kind of just patting myself on the back a little bit. But I don't know. With Buckley, he throws like a lot of garbage out there. He's pretty physical. I mean, he hits pretty hard. I would say he could take a shot relatively well. But he throws a lot of garbage out there, a lot of garbage volume. He got a little bit better. He tightened up his game a little bit. But I'm just not too high on Buckley, to be honest. I think if they put that fight together, I honestly think um, I think the Cuck would win that fight. Unfortunately, I think Ian would win that fight. But yeah, I mean, put that fight together. I think that'd be fun. I agree, but I have Islam because I think Islam will shoot very early and have a grappling heavy approach. Could people make him train hard for cardio? Let's yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think. I mean, obviously, if we know that Ilya has the advantage on the feet, I'm sure Islam does as well. And yeah, I mean, he's typically not as aggressive as a Khabib, but I wouldn't be surprised if, as you said, he does implement a wrestling heavy approach in this fight. It's just the thing is, um, Charles was relatively competitive in the wrestling versus Islam, and it was a very small sample size. I will preface it with that. But in the small sample size, we did see in the grappling between Charles and Ilya, and this is a little bit of MMA math, which usually doesn't work out. But still, this is kind of the evidence that we have to go off of. Ilya was able to not only stop the takedown, but even reverse it and get on top of Charles. So, listen, I do think that Islam will look to have a wrestling heavy approach or a grappling heavy approach. But at the end of the day, I think there's a real chance that Topuria could stop takedowns. And even if he gets taken down, I think he could survive or maybe even get back up. I mean, top pressure of Islam is a different animal than a lot of other guys. But still, I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to, stop takedowns and at the very least survive on the ground. But yeah, I do agree with you though. I think Islam would look to wrestle a lot. But it's unfortunate because a lot of people, including myself, think this is probably the best fight you can put together if you were the UFC. Um, you know, two guys that are at the top of their games, two guys that are essentially undefeated. Ilya is undefeated, and Islam is essentially undefeated. His losses are a lot earlier on in his career. So you kind of had two guys that are just at the top of their games at this point, number 1 and 2 pound for pound in the rankings. But it's unfortunate because I kind of feel like there's too many moving parts at this point, and I don't know if we're going to see it. Because for Ilya, he's going to need to get a title defense. He has to. He has to beat Gaethje, Paddy, or Armin, which I think he will do. But that's just an obstacle, so he has to do that. And then, as I said, for Islam, I think he has to beat JDM, which I don't think is a slam dunk. I think JDM has a real chance to win that fight. But yeah, so Islam would have to beat JDM, and at that point, maybe you can do Ilya moving up to 170 to face Islam, but that'll probably be the only way. I don't think Islam's ever going to move back down to 155. So I don't know. There's just like a lot of moving parts, and it is kind of unfortunate that we may not see this fight. I actually think there's a decent chance we don't see it. Um, but I guess we'll see what happens. I am hoping that I'm wrong, and I'm hoping that that Islam, for whatever reason, decides to move back down to 155 and fight Ilya, and we see that fight. I personally prefer that fight at 155. Um, just because you know there's already a size difference as is. Islam's going to be bigger than Taporia, regardless of whatever weight class they fight. So make it a little bit more even, I guess. Fight at 155. That's what I would personally like to see, but we'll see. As I said, a lot of moving parts for sure. One thing that I also wanted to mention is I hope you guys are enjoying the live stream. If you are enjoying the live stream, be sure to hit that like button. It helps me out a lot. And also feel free to drop a super chat. It also helps me out a lot. Obviously, no pressure to do it. I appreciate you guys just for being here. But yeah, just wanted to shout out that once again. Thank you guys for being here and leaving your comments in chat. I do appreciate it a lot. Honestly, Islam might not get any better. They only get better for like 7 years at least. Take that into account, and even now it's way too close. Yeah, yeah. The only thing that I'll say though, I agree with you. I do think Ilya is kind of on the up and up, and for Islam, I mean, Islam's not like too old or anything like that, and maybe he can make some improvements as his career does go forward. But I think the fighter that Islam is at this point, I agree, is probably going to be the fighter that he is. I don't know how much better he's going to get. And for Taporia, listen, he's a very well-rounded fighter already at this point. How much better could he possibly get? But I wouldn't be surprised if he make improvements. But the one thing that I will say is I don't really think that either one of these guys are going to fight that long. Islam has already talked about potential retirement, and Ilya kind of has done the same thing, where he said he doesn't want to fight that long. He wants to just be great, be a two-division champ, which he already accomplished. Maybe fight some other legends, legends to get on his resume. Maybe fight for that third belt if it's a possibility. And then after that point, I don't think he's going to fight too much longer. I could be wrong, and honestly, I hope I'm wrong, because Taporia is a very big star at this point, and he's a very fun fighter to watch for sure. But I don't know. I just feel like there's a real chance that both of these guys retire relatively soon, to be completely honest. But we'll see what happens. And that's actually another reason and another obstacle for why I think this fight may not happen. But yeah. We'll see. Mikey says, I agree, Juicy. Thank you. Appreciate it. But yeah, we'll see. Oh, man. But yeah, some interesting fights. Listen, I think if I had to matchmake for 155, this is probably what I would do. I would probably do Patty versus Gaethje, number one contenders fight, and put that relatively soon, the earliest they can do it. And then I would probably do Armin versus Charles. I think that's what I would do. I mean, Charles is coming off, a knockout loss. You probably want to give Charles some time off. But assuming that they give him some time off, I would like to see Armin versus Charles, the rematch of those two guys. Put that fight together. And for Gaethje and Patty, that'll be the number one contenders fight. And then for Armin and Charles, that would be the title shot after them, probably. But if Charles wins, I mean, he just lost to Ilya. Listen, matchmaking's not easy, but I think that's what I would probably do. I would also like to see Dan Hooker in the mix as well. Maybe put him up against some of these top guys. Maybe an Armin versus Dan Hooker. We saw Armin and Dan talking about that on X. But the thing about Dan is he got hurt before the Gaethje fight. He had to get hand surgery. And I saw relatively recently, probably a few weeks ago, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, that his hand was still messed up. So I don't know. I guess maybe the hand surgery was botched, for Dan Hooker, and maybe he has to have another surgery, or maybe he just needs more time off. But I just don't know how long Dan Hooker is going to be out, or how much time he needs off. So that's the only thing I'll say about him. But but yeah, there's definitely a lot of good potential fights they could put together at 155 for sure. But yeah, 170 we have Islam versus JDM. That's already announced, and I guess I'll announce it soon where it's going to be. But I'm assuming that's going to be in New York. Then you can do Bilal versus Shafkat, or you could do Bilal versus Usman. I personally would do Bilal versus Usman. The beef is there, two former champs. And if Usman's able to beat Bilal, which I think is a real possibility, um, then he'll probably get another title shot, which would be kind of cool for his career, and everything. After being a long reigning champion, after getting head kicked, after losing the rematch to Leon, and everyone kind of counting him out, for him to potentially get another title shot would be really cool. Um, but yeah, so that's a good fight. Also said the Buck versus the Cuck before. I wouldn't mind that, putting that fight together. Um, but yeah, I mean, they're right next to each other in the rankings, so I think it makes sense. But the only thing I will say though is Buckley's coming off a loss and Ian's coming off a win, and usually, when you're coming off a win, you want to fight ahead of yourself in the rankings, and if you're coming off a loss, usually you fight back in the rankings. Not always, but a lot of times that's kind of how it pans out. So for Ian Gary, I'm assuming he's probably going to want to fight somebody a little bit higher up in the rankings, especially considering he did just fight Carlos Prates, who's way lower than him in the rankings. So if I'm Ian Gary, I probably want to fight, maybe a Leon Edwards, or maybe even a Sean Brady. I know Sean Brady had interest in Ian, so maybe that's a fight they put together. We'll see. Um, who do you think has the best style in the UFC that is easily adaptable to any different matchup? I, for one, JDM, Aspinall Ilya, also your all-time favorite fighter. Yeah, those are all pretty good examples. JDM style is pretty adaptable in a lot of fights. His boxing speaks for itself. Once he's able to get on that inside, he really does go to work, and even his takedown defense has gotten significantly better as of late. We saw that against Bilal a little bit. So yeah, I would agree with that one. Aspinall, I would definitely agree with. He's really good on the feet. He's really good on the ground. Just looking at some different matchups at the heavyweight division, I think he has an advantage one way or the other against everybody. Against Ruagan, he'll just take him down and submit him. So he has a big advantage there. Against Volkov, I think on the feet, he has a big advantage. And even if he wanted to take him down, he could. Against Sergey Pavlovich, he already beat him, but also already beat Volkov as well. But against Sergey Pavlovich, I think he'll just, he knocked him out on the feet already, so he could do that. But I think an easier path is probably just taking him down. For Curtis Blades, he can win on the feet. For Jalton Almeida, just keep it on the feet and win. Against Waldo Cortez Acosta, I think you could beat him anywhere. I don't think Costa's that good. But yeah, so I definitely agree with the Tom Aspinall one. And for Ilya, I certainly agree with that. Listen, maybe I'm glazing a little bit too much to Poria, but I honestly feel like at 145 and especially at 155, there's really like nobody that I think beats this guy. I think in one area or the other, he has an advantage. Against Gaethje, I think he has an advantage on the feet as well as certainly on the ground. The easiest path to victory for Topuria, I believe, is just taking Gaethje down and submitting him. But even on the feet, Gaethje is pretty hittable, and Topuria hits ridiculously hard. So I think on the feet, he can knock him out as well. For Armin, I think the wrestling will be a concern for sure. But at the end of the day, I think Topuria will be able to stop takedowns. And on the feet, I think he's just so much better than Armin. And also, Armin doesn't have a great chin. So I think in the end, Ilya knocks out Armin. And for Patty, just keep the fight on the feet against Patty. On the feet, Ilya, once again, is just so much better. And he hits way too hard to not finish Patty. Patty has a great chin. I get it. He's taken a lot of clean shots, but he also hasn't taken shots from Ilya Topuria. So, yeah, I agree with the Topuria one. Maybe I'm glazing slightly, but I really don't see anybody that beats him at 155. The only guys that I think could possibly beat him is Islam, which we touched upon before. And honestly, I think Ilya could beat Islam, but I think Islam would would pose the biggest threat and the biggest test. The other guy is Gene Silva. Thing about Gene Silva though, he's at 145. Don't think Ilya is going to move down to 145. But the reason why I think Gene has a real chance is because he's super technical on the feet, and he's also super powerful and physical. He can take a shot really well. He can hit really hard. And I think that would be like an all-time fight, honestly, between those two guys. But as I said, Ilya is not moving back down to 145. So I don't think we're ever going to see that. The only way we see that is if Gene Silva becomes a champion and he somehow moves up. But I don't think that's very likely at this point, or at least anytime soon. So probably not going to happen. But yeah. So let's see. Let's see other guys to add to that list. Um, Other guys that I think have very adaptable games. I think Drickus has a very adaptable game. It's just guys that are like very well rounded, and I think Drickus is very well rounded. It's kind of like a wonky game, I would say. He looks a little bit funny on the feed, and even in his wrestling, he kind of falls on his face sometimes. But the fact that he does have pretty good striking and really good wrestling and jiu-jitsu, I think Drickus is another one of those guys that I think is very adaptable to really anybody he goes up against. I think Volkanovski is also another one of those guys. At this point, he's getting a little bit older, and his chin is a little bit shot, in my opinion. I never thought he had a great chin, but at this point, I think it's getting a little bit more shot. But in terms of his skill set, great on the feet, great wrestler. But yeah, I think Volkanovski is another one. Even Marab. I mean, Marab kind of just has like one way to fight, where he pressures his opponents and goes for a lot of takedowns, try to tire him out. But I think that style is adaptable to anybody, honestly. A lot of champions, I think, I would say. Oh, and I didn't answer that last one. Who's your favorite fighter of all time? Charles Oliveira for me. Just watching Charles on his run when he beat Chandler. When he beat Chandler, I'm like relatively new to MMA. When he fought Chandler, I was watching MMA in the UFC at that point, but I was kind of just getting into it. I actually didn't really know Charles that well at that point. But then after I saw that fight, it was like blown away by his performance, and then he was able to beat Dustin the way he was. Then he was able to beat Gaethje. I think Gaethje versus Charles was my favorite fight that I've ever watched live, which may be like a weird take, I guess, but I just thought it was so exciting. And with all the controversy of Charles like missing weight, whatever, and a lot of people thinking that he was going to lose that fight, and then for him to get dropped a couple times early, which he tends to do, then actually dropped Gaethje in the end and found that submission. It was just such a hype moment. Yeah, so Charles is my favorite fighter ever. What about you, though? I agree with your opinions, but interesting fight would be between him and Chin Silva. Yeah, I just typed this. Great minds think alike. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, as I said, I think Ilya beats everybody, everybody outside of Gene Silva and Islam. I think those are the two fights that would be the toughest for him. Um, you know, I kind of hope this doesn't happen, but it's possible. Volkanovski is a great champ. Obviously, he just regained the title. We'll see who he fights next. I'm kind of assuming it's going to be Movsar. I think Movsar is going to beat Pico. And if he does, I'm assuming he's going to get the next title shot. And I think that's a winnable fight for Volkanovski, Movsar. Just because Movsar is not really dangerous. He has no finishes in the UFC. He is really good wrestler and solid striker as well. But I think Volkanovski is like one of the best in terms of technical fighters. And really where Volkanovski runs into trouble, which hasn't happened much in the UFC. I mean, he's has a ridiculous win streak, and he beats most of the guys, obviously. But the one issue that Volkanovski sometimes runs into is guys that hit really hard and are super physical, and they're able to finish him. We saw that against Islam the second time. We saw that against Ilya as well. But for Movsar, he's not really that guy. So I think Volkanovski could certainly beat Movsar. So that could happen, and that could be a title defense on his second run. The problem, though, is we already have what's his face? Gene Silva has already a fight booked against Diego Lopez. By the way, that video is coming out on Friday. I have an in-depth breakdown on that coming out on Friday. Be sure to check that out, 2 p.m. Eastern. But if Gene beats Diego Lopez, which I think he will, At that point, I'm assuming that Gene's gonna get a title shot, and it's gonna be Gene versus Volkanovski, which I really don't wanna see because I think Gene's gonna win, and I think he's gonna knock out Volkanovski. So I'm kinda hoping I'm not hoping that Volkanovski will lose because I want him to win, obviously, against Movsar if that is the fight, but I'm kinda hoping that Volkanovski beats Movsar and then he retires. I think that would probably be the best thing, but I don't think he will. He's talked about it a bunch of times that he just needs to fight. He wants to continue to fight, and and yeah, so I don't think he's going to retire, but that's kind of what I would like to see because I do think Gene Silva beats Volkanovski. Unfortunately, Volk could honestly finish Mobstar, whereas I cannot see the other way around happening. But I think Volk decision. Yeah, I actually I lean Volkanovski to win that fight. I don't know what the hypothetical odds would be if they put that fight together, but I could see a finish from Volk. He's not the most physical guy. He doesn't hit the hardest, but um, over the course of a 5-round fight, he could certainly put a good amount of damage on his opponents. We were able to see him put a lot of damage on Brian Ortega, on Yair Rodriguez, and I do think Movsar is better than both of those guys. But still, over a course of a full 5-round fight, maybe Volkanovski could put a lot of damage on Movsar, and maybe he could find the finish. But I do agree with you. I find it very hard to believe that Movsar would be able to finish Volkanovski, even though Volk doesn't have the greatest chin. I don't think that's very likely. But yeah, that should be a good one. But we'll see what happens in that weight class. I really don't want to see Volk versus Silva, but it's definitely possible that we could see that. I'm also curious to see what happens with Yusuf Zalal. I think he's a really good fighter as well. I would say like solid striking, not amazing, but solid and pretty good wrestling. The thing about Yusuf though is he just doesn't fight all that much. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. Aljamain Sterling, I'm still like pretty high on Aljo. I think he kind of has a similar style of Patty a little bit, whereas on the feet, he kind of just looks to stand the outside, has a little bit of a funky striking style, but he looks to stay on the outside, leg kick until he finds an opportunity. Then he shoots in, goes for a takedown, and a lot of times he's able to get it. And then he can utilize jujitsu to get a submission or just to hold top position and land some ground and pound shots. I think the difference between Aljo and Patty, though, is Aljo has significantly better wrestling than Patty does. But I think they're kind of similar in a way. Um, but yeah. But we have Aljo fighting Brian Ortega. That's going to be an interesting one. I think I lean Aljo, but that's an interesting fight. Aljo's best weapon is certainly is grappling, and that's also Ortega's best weapon. So we'll see. Honestly, if I'm Aljo, honestly, I would consider just striking. I think he can get the better of Ortega on the feet. Probably won't be a fun fight. I think he'll just utilize footwork and leg kick and maybe throw a couple of jabs and right or left straights. But yeah, I do lean Aljamain in that fight. That lightweight, we kind of already talked about these guys. And yeah, that kind of rounds it out. But yeah, I do think there's a decent amount of good fights that could be put together going forward. And I think, listen, I know I talked a lot early on. I have a couple videos actually about this, talking about how the UFC is in decline, or UFC is needs to do this or needs to do that, and they're not putting on good events. And I think earlier on in the year that was true. They really weren't putting on good cards. There was a lot of fights that the fans wanted to see that we just weren't getting. Islam Ilya being one of those fights, and John Jones versus Tom Aspinall being another one of those fights. But I think at this point, the UFC is doing a little bit of a better job at just putting on good cards. Some of these upcoming cards are good. UFC 317 was really good. And also I think the fact that Tom Aspinall is now available for cards is going to be a huge thing. I could see Tom being a guy who fights twice a year. So we went from him not fighting at all in how long to him being able to fight possibly twice a year. So the retirement of John Jones, I think, is in that benefit in that regard. And I think we're going to see some good fights being put together. Something interesting between the Gene Silva and Diego Lopez fight is that Diego Lopez last opponent was 20 times the fighter Gene, and I don't think. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, listen, MMA math usually doesn't work. Um, but I will say that Lopez's opposition is certainly better than Gene Lopez, Gene Silva's. I mean, Gene's last fight was against Bryce Mitchell, and Lopez's last fight was against Volkanovski. But he also went up against Brian Ortega. He also went up against Dan Ige, and some other guys. I mean, the level of competition that Lopez has been fighting is definitely significantly higher than Gene. It's just the thing is, I know like a lot of people talk about this a lot when predicting fights. It's like this guy fought much higher level of competition than this guy, so in other words, this guy should win. But in my opinion, I don't always think that. Just because I mean, it's true in some circumstances. Experience is very important, and the guys that you are in there against is very important. A lot of times, what you see is when guys go up against really good level competitions and they lose, they get better in their next fight, which certainly is true. But I think there's a very select few of guys where it doesn't really matter, and I think Gene's one of those guys. I think Gene is just a guy like if he fought some of the guys that Lopez fought, if he fought Danny Gay, if he fought Brian Ortega, if he fought possibly Volkanovski, I think there's a real chance that he would beat all of those guys. So yes, Diego definitely fought better level of competition, um, but I think Gene is just one of those guys. I think he's just a little bit too good. The reason why I think he'll win is because he's super physical, which similarly to Diego, but also he's a lot more technical than Diego is. Diego does a good job at blitzing his opponents and throwing power shots, and he's able to finish a lot of guys. He's even able to hurt and drop Volkanovski with those blitzes. But the thing is, with Gene Silva, I think Gene is just a little bit too physical. I think he can take some of the shots that Diego throws his way, and also I think he'll be able to, step off to the side and possibly counter one of those blitzes that Diego throws. And if Diego's physicality is not a huge advantage for him in any fight, but especially in this fight versus Gene Silva, I just think it'll be a big issue for him. And I think in the end, Gene will find the victory by decision or by KO. We'll see. I mean, Diego has like a ridiculous chin, so maybe maybe he can eat a lot of the shots that are thrown his way, but I definitely lean Gene, in my opinion, at least. Necessarily, what the guys gives yeah, sure. That's fair. That is fair. Like Diego comes back better and shows mental toughness and grow. But she schools him. Skill set was always title worthy. Yeah, I kind of lean towards the latter. Listen, I think Diego is going to come back better. I think he's going to look really good after the Volkanovski fight. As I said, a lot of times when we see guys fight for the belt, especially if they're really good fighters, which most guys that fight for the belt are, they usually come back better in their next fight. They make subtle improvements, and when you fight the best, it kind of shows your holes. Because a guy like Volkanovski or maybe some other legends, part of the reason why they're so great is because they have great coaches, and also themselves can make in-fight adjustments, and they kind of just pick at your holes and exploit them in these fights. And I think Volkanovski kind of did a decent job at doing that in their fight by utilizing footwork, utilizing his jab. At times, he did step in the fire. He definitely did, but I think he was very calculated about how he did that. And he was able to have success and obviously get the win in the end. But with that being said, I do think Diego is going to look better in this fight. But as I said, I do kind of lean towards the latter of here. Does Gene school Diego? I think there's a chance, honestly. But in terms of Gene's skill set always being title worthy, I think it is, honestly. I really think it is. I mean, listen, I could be significantly overrating Gene Silva. He hasn't, as you said before, he really hasn't went up against anybody that good. I mean, his best opponent is probably Bryce Mitchell, which is not a great level of competition, but or maybe it's I keep forgetting his name, or maybe it's the guy at 155 that looks like Michael Chandler, or reminds me of Michael Chandler with the great chin. I keep forgetting his name, but yeah, let's just say it's Bryce Mitchell. So, I mean, going from Bryce Mitchell to Diego Lopez is a huge step up. So we'll see how he deals with it. I mean, listen, there's been a lot of guys over the years that have looked really good against lower level competition, but once they go up against higher level competition, they don't look nearly as good. And it's possible we see that with Gene Silva. I just don't personally think so. I think he's going to be really good, but But yeah, we will see. We will see. Um, but yeah, by the way, thanks, Mikey, so much for all the questions. I really do appreciate it, and everybody else in the chat and everybody else just watching along. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun. We've been streaming for about an hour and 40 minutes. It's kind of a double stream. I went on stream before for like 20, 30 minutes, but my internet crashed out, so I had to go live again. But yeah, it's been a good stream. If you guys have any last second questions, be sure to let me know. But if not, I appreciate you guys all for being here. As I said, I stream every day during the week. I'll be streaming again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern. Also, we have a video coming out on, well, we had a video come out today. If you guys saw, if you haven't seen it, be sure to check it out. It's an in-depth breakdown of Usman versus Bilal potentially. And then on Friday, we have another video coming out as well. So be sure to check that one out on Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for being here. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Be sure to check out the live stream, 8 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, peace out, boys.